Big spoiler warning coming up ahead, you're going to see a bunch of bosses dying within a few seconds due to how broken this setup is. So if that's something you want to see and do, just keep watching. So starting off with the weapons, the main one I went for was the Bloody Glory. It's got an A+ scaling in Radiance, making it one of the most ideal weapons for a Radiant build, but the actual reason I picked this weapon, obviously aside from having good scaling, is the fact it's a Grand Sword. You can toss people in the air, you can toss people in the ground, you toss out tons of damage, you're basically giving everybody the skip your turn Uno card. It kind of just does everything, except the sword weighs the equivalent of a 4-year-old child, but that's not going to be an issue. I've been able to pump out around 2000 damage with the fully charged heavy attack, which is pretty nice considering this isn't even my strongest move. This is more for saving mana against some of the weaker guys, or honestly just whoever wants to catch a fade really. The sword can easily hold its own against every enemy, not even mentioning the 300 bleed buildup it has, which adds even more damage to my attacks and also makes whoever I'm hitting take increased damage afterwards. And to make this weapon even stronger, if it wasn't strong enough already, I do buff it with the spell Radiant Weapon, just adding some extra holy damage to my attacks, cause, you know, you can never have too much damage. Going into the runes now, there's only one that's definitely needed, and that's the Crafter's Essence. It reduces the weapon's weight down to 0, so it no longer weighs as much as a small child, just saving us a lot of points in endurance. It also drops the weapon's requirements down to 0, which is another nice bonus, so we don't need to get that 20 strength and 32 radiance to use it. The radiance level wasn't the issue, it was more so the strength, but even that's not crazy hard to achieve, more of an annoyance since I don't go into strength at all with this type of build, but anyways. The other ones I equipped are the status rune to further increase my holy damage, which the sword deals a lot of. You could also put on the Orimin, the Oreo rune, to increase the radiance scaling of the weapon, in other words, increasing its damage as well. And for the last one, I threw on the Gravix rune to increase its physical damage because I didn't want the weapon to lean too much into holy damage, because when I go up against enemies that are resistant to holy attacks, I still want to be able to do some decent damage. And lastly, for the weapons, I threw on the Shield of Thunder to get some extra buffs from it, since there's no chance at all I'm using this as an actual source of protection. It feels like I'm holding up a wet napkin to stop a 12th century cannon, so it's not really ideal. You don't need this exact shield, grabbing anything that's light is what you want, regardless of the protection it offers. So, for the runes, I placed a Balaga rune on it to increase my physical defense, the Pertriax one to increase my endurance, which is actually really nice because that spell I use to obliterate people does consume a fair share of stamina, so definitely recommend it if you have it. And finally, the Haslin rune, sounds kinda German, to increase my vitality attribute for more health. Now, you don't fully need a shield for this build to work, it's more of a nice addition with all the protection buffs we can get, and that's about it. When it comes to using the sword though, I'd recommend doing more charged up heavy attacks, so you not only do more damage, but you also stun them as well, which just allows you to follow up with another charged heavy attack to finish them off. And who doesn't just find it satisfying to flip people like pancakes? Continuing on, for my ranged attacks, I like to use Piercing Light as one of my more basic spells. It's really good for taking out guys that are kinda far away, but not really too far away, you know, like in that middle point, or just thinning out large groups of enemies. The spell itself doesn't consume too much mana, making it perfect for regular use, and it also deals a pretty good amount of damage for a basic ranged attack. Well, I'm not gonna lie, it is being buffed by 3 things, like the Hysteria Pendant that increases all spell damage by 20%, which is very nice. The Barrage Root Ring that also increases my spell damage by another 20% for the exchange of a single spell slot, and a second Barrage Root Ring to stack up that buff again. The nice thing here is you don't need only these rings and pendants, there's a whole other set of these that work just as well, like the Imperium Pendant that increases all holy damage and defense by 12%, Orion Sorcerer's Ring increasing holy damage by another 10%, and Passant's Root increasing spell damage by 10%. As long as you have 3 of these 6 items, you'll be completely okay. Now for the part you guys have been waiting for, how I'm nuking bosses with insane amounts of damage. So the first thing we're going to need to get this going is the spell Lucent Beam. Just picture Iron Man shooting a laser beam from his hand and it's going to be the same thing. You shoot out a constant beam of holy damage that consumes mana and deals damage for every second you're holding it. With just the pendant and rings, this attack still deals absurd amounts of damage, easily getting up to a couple thousand within a single burst. But there is an issue I came across when using it. Nothing too bad, I did manage to get around it, as usual. And it's that eventually a boss will take a swing at you and you won't really have time to avoid it or do anything, so you kind of just have to eat it and make that trade with them. Or so I thought. Very similar to my Umbral build I made a bit ago, we're going to use the Soulflay ability to stun our targets so we can use the Lucent Beam for a longer period of time. And to make it as effective as possible, I threw in the Eye of Lorello the Cursed Knight in the primary slot of the lamp to increase the stun's duration. If anything, this is a must-have item for this build. Those extra seconds you get from this are so vital to reaching thousands of damage with a single burst. Like, just get this, it'll make life a lot easier. Then in the secondary slots, using the Umbral Eye of the Pale Butcher and the Eye of, Umbral Eye of, yeah, I don't know. Last time I tried to say this, I ended up calling it New Orleans, and I think I'm gonna stick with that. So, the Eye of the Pale Butcher and New Orleans in the secondary slots. They both increase your damage to an enemy's soul by 25% each. So, I'm getting an extra 50% damage boost when I'm beating on a soul-flayed enemy. This combo can easily kill bosses if not take chunks of health away, but the actual way I killed them in a matter of seconds is due to a bug. I honestly didn't plan this build being around this bug, I kind of just discovered it along the way and thought it'd be a pretty cool addition, and that's about it. So, the way I kill bosses in just a few seconds is extremely simple. Just do the same things I just mentioned, soul flaying them and hitting them with the Lucent Beam, except do it when you're in the undead form. I don't know why, and I can't explain it either, but for some reason it multiplies my damage by ridiculous amounts. Even on some of the regular enemies in the game, it still works. But the thing I love the most about this build though is even if you take that away, it can still demolish people easily. Speaking of demolishing people, we need to make sure we don't demolish ourselves with these spells. Aside from being left wide open when using Lucent Beam, all of these Radiant spells I use build up bleed on ourselves. The damage isn't anything crazy to be worried about, but definitely wearing some heavier armor that has a good resistance to bleed buildup would help out. For me, I kinda not went that route. Like, the armor I'm using has a decent amount of protection all around, but I more so went for it for its looks, and that's the Vanguard helm, the Purger armor, legs, and gloves. You can't tell me this doesn't look clean, and I'm taking this over functionality every day. But still worth to mention, you should definitely get some armor that has a decent amount of bleed resistance. Now, before I get into the stats, I somehow always forget to mention the catalyst I'm using, and that's the Abyss Chalice, tomato, whichever one you want to pick. It's got the best scaling for all Radiant spells, so try to level this up as much as possible. And with everything in this build covered, let's get into the stats. So when it comes to leveling up your character, this is probably the easiest thing you have to follow, because all you have to do is level up your Radiance for damage and Vitality for health. I actually don't think I leveled up anything else, maybe a few levels in Endurance if even, and that's it. Just do every 2 levels you put into Radiance, you put 1 into Vitality for a nice little balance of health and damage. You'll also need the bare minimum of 22 Radiance to use all the spells and weapons, and if you want to count the shield as well, you'll need 9 strength and 8 agility. But like, I'm pretty sure every class starts off with that amount, so I think you'll be good. Well, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to check out some of my other Lords of the Fallen builds, and as usual, thanks for watching everyone, and I hope I'll see you all in the next one.